You know, the morning show is back this week, but I just can't quit what feels like the hiatus edition of PFT Live, technically a hiatus edition of PFT PM. Some things that I wanted to talk about that by tomorrow morning, when it's time for PFT Live, there may be other things that get in the way. And the first thing is an item that I saw just as the show ended this morning from WIVB TV in Buffalo. Comments on the record from a spokesman, Jim Wilkinson, for Pegula Sports and Entertainment regarding the potential new stadium in Buffalo. They don't want to renovate. He made that abundantly clear. Renovation of the current stadium will not work. They want to build a new stadium across the street. And the reality is it is a negotiation. And we've been talking about this for a few weeks now. Yes, it's a negotiation, but you never show up for a negotiation with no ammunition. You've got to have leverage or you end up doing a bad deal. So for the Bills, the leverage is, at least before last night, the unspoken reality that if you don't give us what we want, maybe someone else will. Well, the comment that Wilkinson made last night to WIVB TV included the observation that the local and state officials have to ask themselves whether they want to have a team. That is a strong statement, obviously. It's an aggressive statement. It puts on the table the very real possibility that at the end of the day, there won't be an agreement and the Bills will explore moving. Maybe they will move. So I don't know how you can just ignore that. You have to factor that in. It's easy to say, it doesn't mean anything. They'll get it all worked out. That's what folks in St. Louis were saying 6, 7, 8 years ago. I used to get bombarded with hostile emails from Rams fans in St. Louis telling me, you're wasting your time. Why are you doing this? Clickbait, fake news. They're never going to move. Get over it. All you want to see is the Rams move. I don't care if the Rams move. I don't care if the Bills move. Actually, I want the Bills to stay where they are. And I think that the extent to which we in the media shine the light on this stuff, talk about it, prevent things from happening behind the scenes, be ready to call out lies as they are being told, like the lie that was told by the folks in St. Louis working for the Rams when Stan Kroenke bought the property in Inglewood. Oh, no, that doesn't mean anything. He owns many properties and the league office was in on it. We got to be ready to call BS if we want to preserve the status quo. And look, first and foremost, I am an objective observer of what happens. But to the extent I have a personal preference, hey, we're all human. We have our own preferences. I'd like to see the Bills stay put. But I'm not going to just ignore the warning signs. I think that if you do that, you're asking for trouble in the form of waking up one day and the team is gone and they're not coming back. And I think in order to get this done, the public officials need to take seriously the possibility that the Bills will move. Now, I said this before. Will there be a city out there that is willing to be the pawn in the negotiations for a new Bills stadium? That's what you got to find. Because unless it's a real threat, a credible threat, the negotiators on behalf of the governmental agencies aren't going to care. Okay, fine, you're going to move? Fine. Sure, Jan. Sure, you're going to move. That's the reaction. So that's where it becomes high stakes. And this is where we have to understand human nature. If you put the Pegulas in a position where they do have to go find someone else, other options. Hey, we don't believe that you would ever move, so there. Okay, fine, we'll go talk. We'll see what's out there. We don't know what's out there. Let's go see what's out there. Oh, wait, there's some. Hey, I never thought that San Antonio or St. Louis or Austin or wherever. I never thought they'd put together a package like that. They've made us an offer we can't refuse. Sorry, Buffalo. We wanted to stay. You put us in a position where we had to go out and look. We did, and we found something dramatically better than we ever would have found if we didn't have to go look. That's the reality. That happens all the time in negotiations. You put somebody in a spot where they go do the thing they don't want to do deep down, and then when they start doing it, they start realizing, maybe I should have done this in the first place. So beware, Bills fans in Buffalo, and possibly rejoice, any Bills fans that may be in one of the cities that may come to the table. Until the paperwork is signed, everything is on the table for the future of the Bills, and it's coming quickly. 2 more football seasons. Lease expires 2023. That will fly by. And I think it just makes sense for folks in the media to be sounding the alarm, because based upon what was said last night by a paid spokesperson for the Pagulas, the local and state officials have to decide whether they want a team. Strong statement and merits paying close attention to. Another situation in the NFL, unrelated to football, but still very, very related to the availability of one of the best quarterbacks to play football, the Deshaun Watson situation. Rusty Hardin, after yesterday's comments made by Tony Busby, the lawyer who represents 22 individuals who have civil lawsuits against Deshaun Watson, Busby providing quotes yesterday to leagueofjustice.com, explaining that he's met with the FBI on multiple occasions. He acted in his quotes like he was surprised why the FBI would want to talk to him. Well, he made it clear back in April that there's the potential for federal violations involving Deshaun Watson, to the extent that he was having people come from Atlanta to Houston, crossing state lines for the purposes of creating these potential sexual liaisons, using the internet for the purposes of setting up these transactions. Even if they're all confined to one state, you're using a means of interstate communication in order to make it happen. There's broad federal jurisdiction if they want to exercise it and pursue Deshaun Watson. Rusty Hardin, who represents Deshaun Watson, felt compelled to respond. He had a press conference today. Now, from Hardin's perspective, the FBI is looking into it because it's possible one of the individuals who has made claims against Deshaun Watson is trying to extort him, and that Watson has spoken to the federal investigators within the context of the possibility that an extortion attempt has happened as it relates to Deshaun Watson. Maybe it's both. Maybe there's multiple potential crimes the FBI is looking into, but Hardin confirmed that the FBI is involved. Hardin also read from some text messages, and I'll be writing something about this at PFT. I want to be very accurate in what the text messages say. But the suggestion from Hardin is that the text messages tend to undercut the allegations made by one of the individuals. And there's only like 2 or 3 who claim any type of forcible sexual misconduct by Watson. One of those individuals, according to Hardin's interpretation, generated text messages at the time that would tend to undermine, if not completely contradict, her claims. And that's just a glimpse of what this is going to be like as it goes forward. Now, with 22 different individuals making these claims against Deshaun Watson, again, small handful involve claims of forcible sexual misconduct. The broader brush observation is people were made to feel uncomfortable by his actions during these massages. It's going to be very difficult to prove that they're all lying. And at some point, Rusty Hardin has said, Deshaun and I think they're all not telling the truth. And there's a fine line between accidentally, right? You believe something is true. You're not deliberately lying. You just have faulty perception. That happens. You're not deliberately misspeaking. You're just factually inaccurate because you don't remember it. You know, you were under stress, whatever the case may be, failure of memory, who knows? But there is a difference between deliberately lying and just being wrong. I think at the end of the day, they believe they're all wrong as to what it is that they are saying. That's going to be tough to prove. It's going to be very tough to prove. Now, only 10. In comparison to 22, it's only 10, but 10 is a lot. 10 criminal complaints. Again, just a small handful alleging sexual misconduct of a forcible nature, but this is all going to move forward. And Hardin made it clear, something we explained recently, the grand jury will issue indictments or not when it's ready to do so. Just because subpoenas are being issued doesn't mean that anything is imminent. Could be subpoenas for documents. If it is, there's no specific date when the case is going to be presented. If it's subpoenas for testimony, then you know that on whatever day, October 10, that's a Sunday, I think, October 11, 2021, you're expected to show up and testify at 9:30 a.m. Central Time, yada, yada, yada. That is a clue that at that time they'll be presenting evidence to the grand jury, but we don't know any of that timeline at this point. And that's all the more reason for the interested teams out there to take a wait and see approach as it relates to the criminal case. And now that this FBI thing has been thrown on top of it, it's another reason to wait. I think that a team that really wants Deshaun Watson and understands that, yeah, he'll serve a suspension at some point, not making light of it, it's just part of the reality. He'll serve a suspension, but these matters will conclude and we'll have Deshaun Watson for another 10 or 15 years. We're thinking big picture here, but short term, they have to be concerned about availability. They have to be concerned about the possibility of an indictment. They have to be concerned about the possibility, slim as it may be, of ultimately Deshaun Watson being convicted. You can't give up draft capital, players, whatever it will take to trade for Deshaun Watson, unless you have a pretty good idea, or at least some idea that there's reason to not be legitimately concerned he's going to be behind bars. And at this point, it's just too early. So I thought the Texans would just put Deshaun Watson on injured reserve. David Culley kind of blew that up yesterday when he told reporters that Watson isn't injured. Now, Watson passed a physical. Watson hasn't really practiced. The injuries were mentioned, an ankle, a calf, and maybe something else were mentioned before he started practicing. And I don't know that the league is going to make a big stink about it if the Texans do put him on IR, because I think the league would prefer that. Then the league doesn't have to put him on paid leave. If he's on the 53-man roster and getting ready to play, that may be when the league says, okay, it's time to put him on paid leave. Until that is about to happen, they don't have to do anything. That was a eureka moment I had on Tuesday, talking this through with Sims on PFT Live. It occurred to me, maybe the league has made it clear to the Texans. As long as you find a way to park him off the roster, injured reserve, you're going to pay him, he'll be on the team. We don't have to do anything. We'd rather not do anything. So that may be where it still is headed, but I'll be surprised if he ends up on a football field this year for the Texans or anyone else. And at this point, we just wait and watch and wonder whether at some point in the next 7 months before free agency begins 2022, whether or not Deshaun Watson will be at a point where, from a criminal perspective, there's enough certainty to allow a team like the Eagles, maybe the Dolphins, Panthers, and Broncos. Those are the ones to watch. But the reality is, and this is one of the reasons why it makes sense for the Texans to go ahead and pay the $10 million and keep him for a season. By the time we get to March of 2022, we will have played an entire football season. And let's say a third of the league, between 8 and 10 teams, will likely come to the conclusion that the quarterback that they have is not the answer moving forward. Let's go explore the possibility of getting Deshaun Watson. The more teams at the table that want him, the more money, not money, but the more draft picks the Texans ultimately will get. So I still think that's how it's going to play out. But it was significant to me that Harden spoke. It was significant to me that he shared the text messages. He called out Tony Busby as a guy who's basically craving publicity, who is desperate to get out of the civil cases, who just wants to settle it and move on. Remember, it's Busby who wants confidentiality, not Harden. Harden and Deshaun Watson are willing to have everything out in the open, including the amounts paid to resolve the cases. That is very rare. And that tells me that whatever the amount is they were discussing, it's not nearly enough to make the average person say, wow, with that amount of money, Deshaun Watson must have done something wrong. And speaking of money, one last point, because I keep going back to the early days of this. Whoever, and it was before Rusty Harden was involved, it was a lawyer from the agency that represents Deshaun Watson Athletes First. When they got the original demand of $100,000, instead of negotiating that to conclusion, which I firmly believe would have resulted in a final payment in the range of $50,000 to $75,000, instead of engaging in that back and forth, the representatives for Deshaun Watson basically slammed their door in Tony Busby's face. What did that do? It pissed him off. He filed the lawsuit. More women who had similar experiences became aware of it, contacted Busby. 1 became 2, 2 became 3, 3 became 22. I just can't help but wonder if they hadn't simply continued the negotiation, reached the bottom line, $57,500, whatever the number would have been, Deshaun Watson learns his lesson. Deshaun Watson stops doing these internet massages where he's setting them up through Instagram and he's putting himself in difficult situations. And admittedly, according to Rusty Hardin, some of these encounters became sexual. You get your wake-up call and you move on. Now, you'd still have to worry about the other 21. But if the first case is never filed, if nobody ever even hears anything about it, there's never that trigger, that moment that gets all of the others to call Tony Busby and prepare to take action, or at least try to take action against Deshaun Watson. And one of the things I heard in the aftermath of the avalanche of lawsuits filed against Deshaun Watson from other agents, hey, we settle these all the time. Somebody threatens something, we find out what it's going to take, we sit down and we have a conversation. We don't like to do it. We don't want to cut a check for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, whatever cost of doing business. There's enough there that maybe someone would believe it. And even if you win, you're going to have to go through the process of a full-blown civil lawsuit. And it's going to cost a hell of a lot more than what it would cost to just simply write the check and move on. Plenty of situations arise where allegations are made and players, on the advice of their agents and their lawyers, they write the check and they move on, and we never hear about it. And let this be a cautionary tale of what can happen when the representatives decide to play hardball with a guy who will play hardball back. And Tony Busby got pissed off, and off we go. Now, all that said, there's a reckoning to be had here. There's a lesson to be learned. And I said back in March, Deshaun Watson should sit down with all these people in a room, allow them to feel like they had a quasi day in court, allow them to feel like their concerns are heard and heeded by Deshaun Watson, and ultimately they get justice in the form of some sort of compensation they believe is fair. So we'll see how this goes going forward. Let's answer some questions since we're here today. PFT PM Posse. Does the NFL regret trading training camp holdouts for training camp hold-ins, and do you expect them to address it before next year? If so, how? Teams can't prove if a player is truly hurt or not. Look, some of these hold-ins, and most of them, there isn't even a guy who is pretending to be injured. This is the team acknowledging the reality that all the guy has to say is, my hamstring's a little tight today. The team is allowing a player to not practice, whether it's Jamal Adams or Dwayne Brown in Seattle, whether it's TJ Watt in Pittsburgh, whether it's Stephon Gilmore. You never hear about that. Stephon Gilmore's still on the physically unable to perform list. Teams are allowing the players to be there, to be involved in meetings, and wait to practice until they get the contract situation worked out. As I've said last week, what's the end game if the team ultimately won't give the player what he wants? The team makes its best offer. Jamal Adams took the best offer. What if the player says, nah, I'll just keep not practicing? At what point does the team say, sorry, we expect you to begin practicing and preparing to play, and if you don't, it'll be regarded as conduct detrimental to the team, and we reserve all rights under the collective bargaining agreement to take action against you? Yesterday, when Jamal Adams' deal was done, there was at least one general manager that said to me, well, I wonder if the team decided to play hardball. They didn't have to get to that. The team, as I understand it, made it clear that the offer that was on the table was going to be revoked. And that's when Jamal Adams realized, at the urging of his mother, along with his father, whose NFL career was cut short due to injury, take the money, especially in light of the position that Jamal Adams plays. So the CBA goes another 9 years. That's the framework for making changes to the current model. The current model kind of helps the players. The only way it's going to change is if there's a negotiation where the league asks for some sort of changes and the union would ask for some sort of concessions in return. So I think this is here to stay unless and until the union and the league get together and agree otherwise, and I don't see a reason for them to do it. Rob G, otherwise known as @OnTourForever. How much will players turn on their unvaccinated teammates if it causes them to miss game checks to the point of not blocking hard enough or media shaming? Look, I can guarantee you this. The vaccination rates are currently so high. I don't want to guarantee, because I am curious about a hybrid situation that could emerge. The memo that came out July 22 from the NFL said, if there is a game that can't be played because of an outbreak among unvaccinated players or staff, the team that isn't able to go forward will forfeit. For vaccinated players or staff who have an outbreak and a game can't go forward, no forfeit. Well, you're not going to have an outbreak that is restricted to one or the other, vaccinated or unvaccinated. You're going to have an outbreak. How do you decide who's to blame, the unvaccinated guy or the vaccinated guy? Because the vaccinated guy has reduced restrictions. He can go out and get the virus and bring it to the facility. So I don't think it's going to come to that. And remember, regardless of whether it's vaccinated or unvaccinated players that keep a game from going forward, nobody gets paid. That was the agreement last year. That's still the agreement this year. I believe firmly and completely at the end of the day, they will play the games, all the games, every game. You got 53 guys on the active roster, 16 members of the practice squad. That's 69 total players. All you got to have is 11 on the field. And I'm not saying that the bottom line to go forward will be 11 or 22, but it's going to be somewhere between 22 and 44. There have been times where teams didn't have enough healthy players to put 46 guys in uniform. That's happened. What's the bottom line absolute minimum? Is it 30? I don't know. Whatever it is, we'll find out, or maybe we won't. Hopefully we won't. Hopefully there won't be so many guys who get knocked out the night before a game, the day of a game, whatever, that it's 16 guys off the roster. At a minimum, 16 guys replaced by healthy members of the practice squad. Or what if members of the practice squad have it too? They're all together all the time. So I just don't think it's going to come to it. I think with 69 players per team, available for any given game, available for every given game, they should have enough that they can go forward. James McDonough, Dr. J 144. Why didn't Josh Rosen work out in the National Football League? Well, he had two real chances. And Arizona, as a rookie, 10th overall pick in the draft, Cardinals actually traded up with the Raiders to get that 10th spot. They took him. It wasn't good enough. They get the rights to Kyler Murray and they move on. Then Josh Rosen goes to Miami. And I think they gave him every opportunity to prove that he could be the guy. And I remember at one point, Brian Flores, the coach of the team, said, Rosen's our guy the rest of the way. I think that was a directive from management. Rosen's our guy. We got to find out what we have in. Before too long, Rosen was benched for Ryan Fitzpatrick because Flores just wanted to win games. So Rosen's had a chance to make it work in Arizona, didn't work. Chance to make it work in Miami, didn't work. Tampa Bay practice squad last year. And frankly, if he had stayed, he probably would have been on the practice squad into the postseason and would have won a Super Bowl ring. Decided to go to the 49ers because he perceived an opportunity there, given the questionable status of Jimmy Garoppolo, the absence of real quality behind him. He saw strategically a chance. I'll learn the Kyle Shanahan offense. I'll get opportunities at practice and maybe I'll get a chance to play. Well, here comes Trey Lance. And Rosen started off training camp well, and then he sputtered, and now he's out on his ear. So, I mean, bottom line is he just hasn't been good enough because talent is undeniable. As Sim says, you can't hide money. You also can't hide talent. You can't hide football talent. And we talked about this earlier today. I just think he's a guy who's in that universe of perpetual camp arms who will get opportunities to be on practice squads, be on 90-man rosters, get tryouts. You know, that may be Rosen, may not be on a practice squad, but anytime there's a quarterback question with the team, they'll fly him here, they'll fly him there, he'll get a tryout, and maybe he'll get a spot on a practice squad. Maybe he'll get a regular season game check. But I think any chance of Josh Rosen becoming a regular, competent NFL starting quarterback, that's gone. That's over, especially because every year we're seeing more and more quarterbacks come into the league. I mean, when we consider the combined dynamic of quarterbacks playing deeper into their lifespan than ever before, and so many young quarterbacks coming in and performing well, there's only 32 spots. And I think Josh Rosen has had his chance to hold one of those spots, and I think those days for him, unfortunately, are over. R-Tags 39, do you expect the NFC East to be weak again this year? What other divisions could potentially end up being not so strong? I do think the NFC East will be weak. I think Washington is the best team in that division, and I think they could give the Buccaneers a run for their money if they cross paths in the postseason. Sims thinks the Giants will be better than the Cowboys. I don't know about that. The Eagles, I think, are a work in progress. Other weak divisions, I'd say the AFC South, just because the Texans are the Texans right now. The Jaguars are a work in progress. I think that's going to take some time. And the Colts, with these injury issues with Carson Wentz and Quentin Nelson, I just feel like it's the Titans division. Most of the other divisions you look at have at least two teams that you can look at and say, wow, there's two teams that we have to be concerned about. Maybe in some of the divisions, three teams, maybe in some, potentially the AFC North, potentially the NFC West, we've got four. The one division I have a little bit of a question about, even though it sent two teams to the playoff last year, would be the NFC North. The Vikings, they've got that ping pong, no playoffs in even number years, playoffs in odd number years. They are better defensively. They feel confident about their offense. This feels like a playoff year for the Vikings. So Packers, Vikings, maybe the two teams in the NFC North. But, a lot of these divisions go three deep with quality teams. NFC West, three, if not four deep. NFC South, Buccaneers, Saints. After that, Falcons, Panthers, I don't know. But I think the Saints are still going to be pretty good. The AFC West, you've got the Chiefs and the Chargers. I don't know. Between the Broncos and the Raiders, I think one of them will be decent. So, most, if not, well, not all, most have two. All have one, thank God. Last year, the NFC East really had none, but I think that Washington will be much better than last year, and that's good for the division, because then one of the constant storylines throughout the season will not be, number one, why do we give guaranteed home playoff games to the winner of a division? Number two, should we blow up the division process altogether as it's currently structured and have more than four teams in a division? I've made that argument in the past, maybe making it again. Last question. Shake your booty. What is going on with the injury reporting or failure to report? What can and will the NFL do to make it more transparent? How does it relate to the fact that people are legally betting their money on these games now? Look, this is a soapbox issue, a crusade, if you will, for me from time to time, just because I'm concerned about how things could happen going forward as more and more states legalize gambling. If there isn't transparency when it comes to injuries, number one, it creates inside information that will have value, that gamblers will find a way to try to pursue, that could corrupt the people who are aware of the true state of affairs. For example, Tom Brady's torn MCL or other hidden information. But I also think that if you don't have a system in place, and I know the league is in the process of considering its alternatives, and it understands there needs to be greater transparency and accountability, because no matter what the rules are, if one team is going to break them and get away with it, another team is going to break them and get away with it. Another team is going to do it. Another team is going to do it, to the point where everybody's breaking the rules and the NFL doesn't want to enforce it as to any of them, because then it looks selective. And the one thing the NFL doesn't want to have to do is enforce the rules as to all of them and create a clear impression that there is corruption that is rampant in the NFL, whether it's tampering, whether it's injury reporting, whether it's other things. Cheating happens. The question is, are you good enough to not get caught at it? And the injury report, because it's so general, it's an easy way to manipulate reality, but it's something the NFL is going to have to figure out. I don't know what the answer to the question is. I really don't. Maybe you need some independent body that's involved with reviewing the training records and making an assessment by studying practice and being around the team. That's too expensive. Do you really want to have some independent person who is constantly monitoring for the purposes of ensuring full and accurate injury reports? That I don't think that's going to be good for anybody. All I know is this: the NFL needs to come up with its own solution, because if and when there's ever a major scandal that traces back to the NFL's injury reporting rules, if the feds get involved, either with legislation or the creation of an agency, you'll have someone else create a solution instead of the NFL creating its own solution. And typically, when that solution is created by someone on the outside, it ends up being far less desirable than the solution that the entity that is most directly affected by the situation would come up with. That's it for now. We'll see you tomorrow morning for another edition of PFT Live and more PFT PM as we await tentative return. Sources close to me tell me when the season begins, week one. It's coming around quickly. Until then, as needed, We'll pop open the laptop and we'll talk about whatever it is that may be happening during the course of the workday throughout the National Football League. Thanks as always for some of your time. We'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.